My name is Herman J. Cohen. My colleagues in State Department call me Hank. And I had a very interesting experience when I was Assistant Secretary of State in South Africa, because there was a lot of discussions going on about are the white people going to end apartheid, this system of segregation where the blacks were totally repressed and the 15% of the population who were white were getting all the economic advantages. And the whole world was against South Africa. There were sanctions. The U.S. had sanctions. Europeans had sanctions. And the question was, would change be able to come about? Well, in August of 1989, there was an election in the white community. The blacks never participated in an election. And it looked like a new generation of whites were coming to power. The old guard who had started apartheid were in their 80s, and they had to leave. So new people were coming in. And one of the leading candidates of the main white party was F.W. DeKlerk, the Minister of Education. So I went down to South Africa in August of 1989. I asked to see him. He was the leading candidate and most likely to be elected president. So he was in Durban, the beach city on the Indian Ocean, campaigning. And he said, well, you can come down and meet me there. And I went down to Durban, and he met me in his hotel room one-on-one. We had no note takers. It was just me and him. And he said, I'm a child of apartheid. I was brought up in it. I believed in it. I still believe in it. I thought that was the best thing for the white people. But I'm going to tell you something right now. We're going to end it when I become president. I said, you're going to end it? Why are you going to end it? He said, we are an industrial nation, and we cannot advance and expand our economy without the assistance of the black population. We need their labor. We need them to be educated, to become professionals, engineers, computer scientists, technicians of all kinds. And we can't have that unless they have political rights. So when I become president, we're going to legalize the African National Congress, the Communist Party, everything that all the political organizations of the blacks, and we're going to release Nelson Mandela. So I listened to that. I couldn't believe a word. I was just stunned to hear this. After all these decades of hard line, we're going to keep apartheid, we're going to keep segregation. And so I went out of that meeting almost staggering. And I immediately reported this to Washington. I sent a message to Secretary Baker. I said, we got to invite this person as soon, even before he becomes president, make sure he doesn't go backwards, that he keeps on what he says. But I got a message back from Secretary Baker saying, President Bush does not want to invite anybody from South Africa before he invites Mandela. Mandela will be the first person invited. After that, we can have DeKlerk and other people. So I was just totally happy, but I couldn't talk about it. Okay, so then I get back to Washington, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee holds hearings in October. My meeting with DeKlerk was August. The election was going to be in December. So I go to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and the topic was increasing sanctions against South Africa. So the question that was going to come along, that they sent us in advance, was what has been the impact of sanctions on South Africa? And this led to a big debate in the State Department because we knew President Bush hated those sanctions. So we couldn't come out and say, oh, sanctions were great. They really made them think again about their policy. So we came up with compromise language. Sanctions had the most difficult impact on the black community because it stopped investments and it caused a rise in black unemployment. The whites didn't suffer economic hardship, but they had a psychological impact on the whites, and they got them to think about maybe their system wasn't that great. So I was authorized to give this to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So I go up there, and Senator Simon says, ask the question. And I gave the answer. And then, after I gave that answer, it said, well, it sounds to me like we have more sanctions. That'll really push them over the top. So knowing what DeKlerk told me, what he was going to do after he got elected, I said, Senator, yeah, that's something to talk about, maybe increasing sanctions. But, they're having an election, new people are coming in, you never know what they're going to be doing. So let's have another session of this committee in February. And I'll be very happy to talk about increasing sanctions at that point. So they said, yes, okay, that's a deal. We'll meet again in February. So I go back to State Department, and Secretary Baker said to me, gee, Hank, you bought us some time. Isn't that great? Okay. So the next day in South Africa, headlines, we do not accept ultimatums. So they saw my testimony as an ultimatum. Shape up or there are going to be more sanctions, you see. But anyway, it was a fantastic experience carrying the secret from DeKlerk for 6 months until they had an election. And of course, he kept his word. He released Mandela, and everything was uphill from that point.